This is Odaat Chat, your instant connection to recovery and community, one day at a time. This podcast may contain strong language, sexual content, and spiritual truth. Listener discretion is advised.
Welcome to Odaat Chat. My name is Arlina, and I'll be your host. In case you didn't know, Odaat stands for One Day at a Time. I named it after my favorite 12-step group that meets daily, which is how we do recovery, one day at a time. And you might be wondering about the purpose of the podcast, and what I can tell you is that besides wanting to clear up a lot of misconceptions about addiction and recovery, I also wanted to share the teachers' ideas and exercises that have helped me on my own journey over the past 22 years that really fall outside the parameters of 12-step groups. So there you have it. And I have a thought for the day to share with you, which I just came across on Instagram, and it really struck a chord with me because I know a lot of people struggle with fear on a daily basis. I mean, really, we all do. And the idea that I'll leave you with is never let your fear decide your future. So there you have it. In this episode, I'll be chatting with Jana. We had a long, intimate talk covering a wide range of topics, including the repercussions from a DUI that she had years ago. She had her moment of clarity, which led her to rehab and living in a recovery house, so she'll talk about those experiences. And just a little heads up, we do talk about God quite a lot and her religious faith. She is a Christian, and while I share a lot of her beliefs, I'm not limited to those. And but I don't want that to scare you off. Just because we talk about God doesn't mean that we're not open to other ideas. So we also talk a lot about dating and recovery, love and sex, and some other fun stuff. So just hang in there. I think you'll actually really enjoy this conversation. And before we jump into it, I just wanted to say thank you for connecting with us. If you haven't yet, please visit odaatchat.com and read Sharing the Secret. It really tells you actually gives you more of a feeling about what we're trying to accomplish here. And if you want to share your thoughts and opinions, you can also leave comments there as well. So with that long intro, please enjoy this conversation I had with my dear friend, Jana. Well, Jana, thank you so much for joining me on the podcast today.
You're welcome.
I'll just ask you a little bit about your background. So your name is Jana.
Yes, my name is Jana. And I grew up in Saratoga. Yeah, moved to Los Gatos later on.
Okay.
But grew up in Saratoga. I went to Saratoga High School.
Okay.
So
How old are you?
I'm 32.
You're 32. And what do you do professionally?
I just graduated nursing school.
Yay!
Passed
the board.
Passed the boards. Yeah.
Very exciting.
So now I'm hoping to start working pretty soon.
Yeah, we'll talk about that. The topic of today's discussion is going to be living with unresolved problems. So,
yeah.
And I think that's something that many people struggle with. So we'll talk about that as we get into it, but just so people can get sort of a mental picture. And how long have you been clean and sober?
I got sober May 20th of 2012.
2012.
A little over 4 years.
Did you go to rehab, or did you just come to meetings? Or?
I did. I went to the Camp Recovery Center.
Okay.
For 30 days in June of 2012. Yeah.
You had a little bit of relapsing in the beginning.
Yeah. So
what was your experience?
Well, my experience with that. So in 2010, I actually got a DUI.
2010.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I was involved in a collision, and thank God everyone's okay.
Did nobody got hurt?
Nobody got hurt.
Okay.
Yeah. So that occurred, and I kind of started recognizing, and it was I was unable to now hide the fact that I had been probably drinking a little bit too much in my life and in my socializing. And I started going to meetings, and I kind of was trying to relate and to stay sober. And I got a sponsor, and I really struggled with how everyone was doing this. I didn't really understand how people were staying sober. I could relate, but I didn't think that it was for me. I'm different.
It's nice for those people.
Yeah, you know, I felt like I was different. I felt like I couldn't picture my life without alcohol. How are you doing this? So I started going to meetings, but like I said, I continued to go back out. And so when the time came to reach my sobriety date on May 20th of 2012, that was after an occasion where my family had yet again came to me openly and had said, we're concerned about you. I call it a mini intervention.
I was going to ask, it sounds like kind of an intervention.
Yeah.
But with like no facilitator or no, they just, and you're close to your family, right?
Very close.
There's no, your parents are not drinkers or they're not alcoholic for sure.
Yeah.
Very nice people, well-adjusted.
Yeah.
Happy people.
Yeah.
What is your problem?
No, exactly.
Just kidding.
Well, no, that's what's funny is when I tell people too at meetings, I say that, I think our past really doesn't have, sure, sometimes it can have something to do with our behaviors, but, in this case, I feel like there's nothing that happened to me while I was growing up that could cause for me to want to escape or rebel or
no abuse,
no tragedies, amazing family, totally supportive. I rode horses for the first, when I was 6 to I think 15 years old.
Oh wow!
So for 10 years,
that's the equestrian community is pretty intense and highbrow and kind of fancy.
Yeah, and my parents, I had a pony.
You did?
I did. Peekaboo.
Daddy, I want a peekaboo. Oh my gosh. Daddy, I want a pony. And he said, okay.
Yeah. And then once I outgrew her, I got a horse, Tessa. So it was just part of my life. Okay. And my mom, I think they were impressed.
Your mom stay at home? Mom.
Yes.
Okay.
Mom stay at home.
And Dad, what did Dad do professionally?
My dad is in commercial real estate.
Okay.
He was
very successful.
Co-founded, his company. And he did that after a successful football career.
A professional football player.
Yeah, he played.
That was very cool.
Yeah. It was.
And you have siblings?
I do.
You have an older brother?
An older brother.
He's older. Mm-hmm. And is your sister older than you two?
Yes.
Okay, you're the baby.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. I was born on her 3rd birthday.
Oh, that's right. You guys share a birthday.
Yeah.
But you guys are close, so it's never a problem. That's amazing. Your brother struggled with alcoholism as well.
Yes.
And he went the church route, right?
Yes.
Is that right?
Yeah.
And that has worked for him.
It has. We just actually celebrated his 10 years.
10 years. Which is interesting because there's more than one way to get sober. Mm-hmm. And I think for some people it seemed to do fine. And then I've seen, I had an uncle that got sober and he went to rehab and never went to meetings and stayed sober till he died, and he was in his early 80s. So, listen, there's many paths, right? So
absolutely.
So I think that's important to point out that, 10 years is a long time.
Yeah. It was at his first intervention, actually, when I was 18, that I recognized that I was an alcoholic.
Were you thinking to yourself, I'm doing some of these things too?
Yeah.
Wow.
So I knew early on at 18, but didn't get sober until 28.
18, okay. I had to wrestle with the idea for a couple of years before I was willing to admit that I too was an alcoholic. So
yeah,
I get that. So you got sober in 2012.
Yes.
Right.
And then I went to the camp.
Then you went to the camp. Mm-hmm. And then you found yourself fully immersed at some point. Absolutely.
I think I had some experience, with people that I had met in the program. I had created some good relationships. Mm-hmm. And I wanted to, what I say usually is that I wanted to throw everything at this disease that I possibly could.
You were all in.
I was all in. I needed to secure my future. So I went to the camp for 30 days. After that, I got involved in the outpatient camp program, which was about 3 or 4 months, intensive outpatient, and that was in Campbell.
Oh, okay.
Not in Scotts Valley, where I inpatient attended. And I lived in a sober living environment.
Did you really?
I did.
That whole SLE thing?
I did.
What was that like?
It was interesting.
How many girls? It was a girls, right?
Actually, it was co-ed.
Really? Was it Amicus House? Or?
No, it was the Boynton House. It was through TLC.
Okay.
I think it's Tender Loving Care.
Oh, how sweet.
I think that's what it stands for. And it was interesting. There were 10 guys.
Oh my gosh.
And 4 girls.
Holy smokes.
And the 4 girls shared the master bedroom upstairs.
Okay.
It was a unique situation, but it worked for me. It was what was the most affordable. I paid $800 a month.
$800 a month to share a room with 3 other girls? Wow.
I would love to be paying $800 now for my apartment.
But you don't want to share a room with 4 other girls. So.
No, not 4 other women. So that was a good experience, but it had its challenges.
For sure.
Some people had struggled to stay sober.
Didn't really want to be there.
Yeah.
Weren't really.
Yeah.
Hadn't really accepted their disease.
So, but I took everything that I could out of the opportunity. I adhered to the meeting schedule and being home by curfew, and I stayed there for about 3 months.
Okay, you didn't feel like that sense of rebellion, like you were done with that part, like you were willing to submit?
Yeah. After that kind of mini intervention, like I mentioned, which was
it like a moment of clarity for you, or did you have something like that?
I feel like I look back and I recognize it as being a moment of clarity. I remember sitting on my couch, totally, utterly embarrassed, hungover, sickly looking. I was overweight. I was flushed in the face. I was sweating. My family was sitting around me. I smelt of alcohol.
How much were you drinking?
I wasn't a daily drinker. I took pride in the fact that I thought I was a functioning alcoholic.
Okay.
I don't like the word pride, but at that point, I think I felt like I can go to work and I can function, and I can go to the gym.
Right.
And then I can go out and have fun. And of course, there would be days where I would party hard, and then maybe the next day I would recuperate.
So like binge drinking?
Absolutely. Yeah. Binge drinking, blacking out, totally a part of my story since high school.
Right.
I mean, I had my first drink when I was 12, but in high school I definitely partied with the best of them.
I feel sorry for those people who don't black out, because then they remember everything. It sounds awful.
It's true.
But I totally took you out of your story. You were talking about your moment of clarity, and you were sitting on the couch. And...
Yeah. So, I really felt like I sat there and I had realized that, I had been going to meetings. I knew there was a better solution. I had been living the last 6 months of my life kind of like in a lie. I was lying to my family. I was lying to my friends. And what I realized at that point was that I was doing everything that I wanted to do, and then I was not. I still was unhappy. I was still miserable.
Right.
So I kind of realized, like, is this how you want to live? And, the answer was no. And I finally was able to take this opportunity with them sitting in front of me and admitting that, yes, this is a big problem, and that, yes, I need help. And then that's when we decided to get me into recovery program.
And where are you with the whole God thing? Did you grow up in the church, or?
I did. I am a believer, and, I respect everyone's
You go to the Christian church?
Point of view. Yeah. Okay. I go to Christian church, and I grew up going to Saratoga Federated, and I, did all those classes and those fun, there were Wednesday night Bible study sorts of things where you would go with friends and stuff. But, it was kind of more to socialize as a child. Yeah. And yes, I went to church with my family. So I was a Christian. But I think when it became time when high school and college, when I had a choice of whether or not I wanted to go, I just didn't have any interest. I think the things that I was doing in my life, always the way that I was behaving, I think I always innately knew this wasn't something that God would approve of. And so it was almost like I was hiding from him.
Yeah.
Even though now I realize he was with me the whole time.
Yeah, there's no hiding from him.
Yeah, exactly. So the way I was behaving, I wouldn't feel appropriate, sitting in church on Sunday.
Right.
Right. I mean, I had a very,
like a double life.
Yeah, very double life.
Yeah.
I got involved in a lot of, drugs, and I mean, I don't know if we could talk about that.
Yeah, everything.
You know, I smoked weed, and I was...
We can curse, too.
Tampering.
You're not a big swearer.
I'm not a big swearer, but only when I'm mad.
Oh, yeah.
So I was tampering. Yeah, I mean, tampering. I smoked a lot of weed. You know,
let's not just
be
flower it
real.
up here. Let's just be real. Call it what it is. I was high.
Yeah. I mean, in high school, I was doing ecstasy and shrooms and smoking weed. And then in college, you know, I got into... Because it's fun. And I got into, you know, the cocaine. And let's see, where was I going with all that?
Sorry, I totally derailed you. I was like, woo, that was so much fun. Because that's what it's not like you were running.
It starts that way.
Yeah, it starts that way. Like I tell my kids, I go, people do drugs because they're fun.
It's fun.
Make no mistake. I didn't want my kids to just be like, all of a sudden, why is everyone having so much fun? What are you doing? I want to have fun. You know, I didn't want there to be any surprise. But it's what happens after that. You have fun, and then pretty soon... That's the goal, is to get high so that you can have fun. And pretty soon you become dependent on it.
Yeah.
Pretty soon you're doing it all the time.
It's the only goal.
It's the only goal. And then it creeps into every area of your life. Is that sort of the progression that it happened for you?
Absolutely. And that progression occurred as well as my relationships with men. That was something, I think that's what I was leading. I was very promiscuous, you know. I had very... my morals were low and my standards were low, and
funny how your standards just get lower and lower. The seeking lower companionship until you become the lower companionship. Yeah,
the water seeps to its own level. Exactly.
Yeah.
And so again, that even made me feel more. I mean, in the moment you feel powerful, but then, you know, and so these are things I knew God did not approve of, and.
Do you really feel like it's an approval thing, or do you feel like it's more want us to do those things because God knows that we don't feel good about ourselves after we do them?
That's it. Yeah.
It's not like a shaming thing.
You're right. He loves us anyways.
Yeah.
Regardless. Yeah. I think he wants us, you know, I read this book recently called Sex, Love, and Lasting Relationships, and you know, it's about him guarding our hearts. And so that we're not doing things that are going to cause pain down the future. Yeah. Because I was finding happiness and hope in the drugs and in the sexual endeavors. And that's not where I can find that love and peace.
Well, so because there's a price tag. Like, you can do all those things and you can have the momentary rush of power, which I think is what we're all seeking in a way, because I think we feel so powerless in so many different ways and different areas of our life that, you know, sexual empowerment is intoxicating. Mm-hmm. Been my experience that women don't typically separate love and sex the way men do.
Yes.
And so we get damaged by that. And I just feel like, you know, I have that parent-child relationship with God. And for me personally, it feels like, you know, now that I'm a parent, if I see my kids do something, like, I don't want them to play with knives because, you know, that's dangerous. They'll get cut, right?
Exactly.
And I don't project like, oh, you should be ashamed of yourself because you cut yourself with a knife. It's like, oh, I don't want you to get hurt. And I think a lot of times, like, I grew up in the church, but I got confused that there was shame attached to the sexual promiscuity stuff. And that wasn't of God, that was of humans. Mm-hmm. That was of man. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And so this whole idea of using shame to control people shouldn't come from church, but sometimes it does. There are people who will be like, oh, you should be ashamed of yourself. You shouldn't behave that way. Mm-hmm. But I don't think that that's of God. I think God is all love. And it's like, I just don't want you to get hurt.
Exactly. Yeah. And now, over the years, now that I've learned more, that's absolutely what I believe. Yeah. He doesn't want us to get hurt. He's trying to protect us.
So did you find that when you were struggling with those ideas of being promiscuous or doing crazy things, that you would wake up the next day and be like, oh, I'm in conflict of what I really believe and what I'm capable of choosing?
I think there was a point, I'm trying to remember what I felt. I would wake up and, I felt a lot of shame, and I was hungover, and I kind of wanted to just black it out and forget about it and just keep damaging myself.
Yeah.
I mean, really, it was kind of like, forget about that. What can I do? And sometimes that did mean, while I said I didn't drink every day, sometimes it did mean continue drinking the next day.
Right.
To forget about that. But once I had that, clarity, I mean, I knew that my beliefs that was all in conflict.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So I think at some point, but for so long, I think I just tried to push it down and hide it. But when I would, now that you mentioned that, when we would go to church as a family, I would sit there and I almost would feel as though the sermon was for me, or that I would be emotional and I would cry. And so I knew God was with me, and I knew that what I was doing wasn't right, but I didn't know how to change.
Yeah, and I feel like everyone gets so caught up in right and wrong, but it's like, is this hurting me or is this helping me? It's sort of a more gentle way of looking at it.
You're right. You're right. I'm very straightforward with like my wordings, like right, wrong. But I think...
Well, I think that's common.
Yeah. I think it's something I understand, but I mean,
it's common terminology to think, am I doing the right thing or am I doing the wrong thing?
Mm-hmm.
When you grow up in the church, I grew up in the church too, and it was all about right and wrong.
Yeah.
It was about moral compass, but I've come to understand, like through recovery, is that it's not really about right or wrong. It's about, can I face the things in myself that I don't like?
Yeah.
It's like we all know what the right thing is to do, but it's, are we capable? Because once my addiction took hold, I lost the ability to choose. I was incapable. I knew what was right, but I was incapable of doing what was right. Like even now, it's like I could eat broccoli and brown rice and chicken every day, but I don't want to. I'm incapable of. I'm incapable of that. Maybe it's because the need for variety, or who knows. But even in my using time, I knew, but I couldn't face my feelings, right?
Yeah.
So I was really seeking to distract myself and from my powerlessness and my unmanageability and all the shame, right? So it's a vicious cycle. But don't you feel like having a strong sense of God and community has helped you along your path to...
Absolutely. You're right when you say, like, doing what is right. That's something that can say, like, is this drawing me closer to God, or is this pulling me further away? Mm-hmm. And I think about that in the context of relationships as well. Friendships, boyfriends, is this situation pulling me closer to God, or is it pulling me away? And I think that's one way to kind of gauge.
Is that your barometer for...
Yeah, for what's right for me, I guess, at the time.
Yeah, what's helping you to grow closer.
Yeah, and I mean, I was rebaptized in 2014. I was baptized as a child, but I don't believe I knew really what was...
It wasn't your choice.
No.
It's different when it's your choice.
Yeah, it was just with my Bible study church group, and, it was just what we did. And of course, I think at that time I recognized what I was doing, but I don't think that it was nearly as powerful as it was going back and doing it in front of my church as a sober woman.
Right.
I think at that time I had, 2 years, and I was very excited to rededicate my life to God. And even before then, I believe that God had removed me of the obsession that I had to drink alcohol and to just engage in other activities. And my faith had become so much stronger. I had been more drawn to Him, more drawn to the Bible, to Bible study, to the fellowship. And, over the years, it's been great to watch that progress. As now, I used to attend Bible studies, and I would have difficulty with my anxiety, and I wouldn't show up every week. And then to actually going to a Bible study and taking down my wall and meeting with girls and being open and sticking with my commitments, to now having been asked to come back and be a leader in one of the groups.
That's very cool.
And, that just takes it to another level. And I believe that's my next step of faith, is becoming involved and being of service to to other women as well.
Outside
and to myself.
Program.
Yeah. Outside of the program.
And yet...
And sharing my story.
Yeah. And yet you have not decided that that's going to replace program.
No. I love the program. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, for me, we talked about in the beginning, it's different however you want to do it. But for me, I appreciate the fellowship of our recovery program.
Yeah.
The people I see. Mm-hmm. Sometimes if I'm having a bum day, I go to a meeting and I feel better.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, my brother even asks me, you still going to meetings? And I'm like, of course.
Of course.
You know, I mean, that for me, I think
working.
is going to be, it's going to be a permanent in my life. And I enjoy it now. I can't picture my life without it.
I mean, I like to hear that. And it was funny because I grew up in the church, but I got away from it. I was very disillusioned because when I was like 14, I was smoking pot with the pastor's daughter, and we would go to church high, and I was like, I'm going to hell. A Southern Baptist church, no less. I was like, I'm going to hell for sure. And, you know, I couldn't make myself be good, so I decided to be good at being bad and took pride in that and made a joke of it. But after I got sober, it's like I knew my way wasn't working. I ended up going back to the church for a while, but the ladies that I was meeting at church didn't relate to dancing naked on top of tables drunk. I was like, "What? You didn't do that? What?" You know what I mean?
You didn't lose your shoe?
You lose your shoe. It's like, you didn't go home with your panties in your pocket on Sunday morning? That's weird. Like, they weren't relating to me. Like, I needed to go where people got me.
Totally.
Yeah. And so, because I found a new normal.
Yeah.
In program. But it didn't make me feel like I couldn't go to church, right? Mm-hmm. Like, I was able to go to church still and just feel washed over with the goodness of God and go to my meetings and get filled up from the inside with the love of the fellowship of the people.
Totally.
And people get so hung up on the word God, and it's like, for me, the word God is just a word, and we assign meaning to it, right? And so if you think about God historically, it's like the meaning of the word has changed over generation after generation and it's almost like layers of glass over the word of God. And it's like, if you've ever seen an image underneath many layers of glass, it becomes totally distorted. And then people look at the distorted word and they go, that's God, it's not for me. And it's like, no, there's just a bunch of crap on top of the actual. And the thing is it's whatever meaning we assign to it. And people don't realize they can change the meaning at any time. Like, we are free to change the meaning. And what that means is that we're stripping away all the things that don't work. That's what I really appreciate about the program, is that you can strip it down and start over. Everyone has their own concept of God. And some people are atheists and they can get sober.
Yeah.
Or agnostic and they can get sober. And everybody has something different, right?
Yeah.
And it sounds like you and I share something very similar.
Absolutely. He's our father. But to touch on what you just said about, atheist and agnostic, I was grateful actually to be asked to speak on a panel for ACIPA, which is All California Young People in Alcoholics Anonymous. I did that, and, I was on a panel as the believer, and there was the atheist, and there was the agnostic.
Amazing.
And, I knew one of them, and one of the gentlemen was from LA. But we all just came together, and we had the same goals. We were able to speak about our path and what we believe. And in the end, it was kind of like, but we all have the same desire to live a life of sobriety and to just be the best people that we could be. Like,
be of service to others. Yeah. Do the best we can to improve.
Yeah, we have the same goal.
But the thing is I don't care, but you're all sharing love, right? That's like the one thing that everybody has in common.
Yeah.
And I felt like if you the whole concept of God, if you just boiled it all down, it would just be about love.
Exactly.
Yeah. And I feel like if you could boil down recovery to one word, it would just be relax. We don't have to control everything. We don't.
Yeah.
And actually, that's maybe a good segue to talk about what we had discussed about our topic for today, which was living with unresolved problems. And I wanted to ask you about that because I know a lot of people have to live with unresolved issues, and you talked about your DUI in 2010. How is that affecting your present day situation with you professionally?
It is affecting my life, and it's unfortunate because at the time I remember so much self-hatred that I didn't care what happened to me. So when I got the DUI, I didn't care about what was going on in my life. And, now, well, to go back to when I was in rehab, that's when actually I decided to become a nurse.
Okay.
I decided to change that path of my life. I was in real estate for a few years prior to that, and I knew that if I could be sober, I could help other people in that way, and I could follow my dreams and become a nurse. Mm-hmm. So I started to go back to school, and I started to finish my prerequisites and got into nursing school. And so I recently graduated, and I, applied to the Board of Registered Nursing, and I was just hopeful about this entire process. I was excited. Mm-hmm. I was done with nursing school. I was being encouraged by my friends and the fellowship who are also nurses, some nurses in the program.
Lots of nurses.
And, I told them about my past, about my DUI, and everyone kind of reassured me that things would be okay. And things will be okay. But what had happened for me was, upon applying to the board, I received a letter of denial of my application.
Oh my God.
Now, this was my worst fear.
Right.
I went through all of this. And
you I gotta say, you worked so hard. You fell off the face of the earth for 2 years.
It was a 1-year accelerated program.
Was it 1 year?
Mm-hmm.
It seemed like you were gone longer.
I know.
I miss you.
It was, we prepared with all of our prerequisites and everything before that. But in 1 year, it was full time. And I was gone. But I still managed to make my meetings and meet with my family and friends. Yeah. And so I got that letter, and it was my worst fear realized. And immediately I dropped my hands, and I was going to start crying. And I remember a couple tears coming out, and then I kind of was just like, okay, I need to get into action. Like, what can I do now to prepare me for the next step? So I mourned briefly, and then recognized, who can I call? What can I do? And I started to reach out to people whom went through similar things in the past. And, this just meant in my situation that I needed to appeal, because I felt strongly in my remission and in my recovery. And I feel like this doesn't...
It's been 6 years.
Yeah, that was 6 years ago. And I'd been sober for a little over 4 at this time. Mm-hmm. So I felt like, no, I'm not going to take this. God didn't bring me this far to leave me here. I'm going to appeal and take the necessary steps moving forward. So, that's just kind of what the last couple weeks of my life have been geared toward. Mm-hmm. Thankfully, the board did allow me to take my NCLEX, which is the board's my registered nursing license test, and I passed that. And now it's just taking the necessary steps to move forward and figure out what is going to happen with my license, whether it'll be unrestricted or restricted with probation. And so I've met with, a few other people, and I've actually talked with an attorney and someone who has experience with nurses and with DUIs and with the board. And that was very encouraging for me, because this is uncharted territory. I'm not familiar with how to navigate this.
And I would imagine it would be tempting to be scared.
Yeah, very tempting. But no thought came to pick up.
Interesting.
No, there's no way I'd be going back. Yeah. In the beginning of my sobriety, I had so many blank checks. If this happens, I'm drinking. If this happens, I'm drinking. And there are no more.
Interesting.
There's one I'm still battling with.
What is it?
Which I still don't think I would drink, but my biggest fear is like a loss of a parent.
Okay.
But I don't know why I even just brought that up. It's just, honestly, it's the one thing that scares me so much.
You're not sure if you could stay sober through the loss of a parent or a sibling?
Well, yeah.
Or a baby?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
But
I know I could.
But it's not a blank check like you had before. Like it's like predetermined, like, oh, if this happens, I'm drinking.
Yeah.
Now it sounds like, gosh, I really hope that my sobriety is strong enough to get me through a situation like that.
That's actually, I think, more of what it is.
It doesn't sound like a blank check.
Yeah. Yeah. I think
we all have those fears.
Yeah, I think it's just my biggest fear. But it would be like the only reason where I would want to forget so much. You know, my family's healthy. Everything's great.
Yeah.
I also know that, you know, if I would want to be strong. I would want to be strong for my brother and my sister and my, you know, I mean, the others in my family. I know that if something happened, that God will get me through. And that's where my faith has come in. I just know, and I have faith that God is sovereign, right, and that He is in control, and that nothing He does or doesn't do really will affect His love for me and for us.
So let me ask you something. Control is a funny word, right? Because, I mean, I've seen things. A friend of mine, her daughter committed suicide. And so I know that her boyfriend, that they were really close, her daughter was actually living with her ex-boyfriend. Because she was like 19 years old. Mm-hmm. And, you know, moms and daughters don't always get along at that age. And anyway, she went to go live with him, and she killed herself while living at his house, not in his house, but and it was interesting to watch their experiences because she went to God and the boyfriend turned away from God, and it kind of left me feeling like He won't necessarily control people, like that whole free will. But I feel like God gives us strength to get through even the most difficult situations like that.
Absolutely.
Do you feel like that's been your experience? Like, not necessarily like God is a controlling thing, but as a giver of strength.
Absolutely. I think that we live in a fallen world.
Yes.
And so I think that because of this fallen world, you know, the Lord will use every situation, no matter what happens, for something to be learned from it.
Right.
Whether it's sickness, whether it's death, whether it's suicide, whether it's, you know, anything.
Yeah. It's more like not control, but provide, like if we seek strength.
Yeah.
So I know how hard you worked. It's like you sacrificed a year more of your life.
Yeah, I think that's interesting. Good. Thank you for reminding me. I kind of try to keep a positive attitude with everything.
Like in denial.
So, in denial, a little bit. Kind of like, yeah. And, well, because also I do think that while I go through struggle, I always can look back on everything I've struggled with and find the positive in that.
Yeah.
But I did. And
you were confident you were going to find the positive in this, too.
Yeah. But I did have a situation where I was kind of smacked in the face with reality. And I'm a little grateful for it, but I'm also kind of like,
hey,
peed on my parade. I had lunch with a family member, and who's also a believer, and I was scared, and I said, "This happened, and the denial of my license happened, and that I got a job opportunity that I couldn't take,
right?
Because I mean, prior to all this, I had been applying for jobs, and then you know, you would just assume your license is pending, and
then you were confronted with the fact, you know what, it might not.
Yeah, you know, the family member had said to me, "You're focusing on." He had said, wow, this is very unfortunate, your situation. And, you know, and I'm like, you know what? But God has a plan. And, you know, if this wasn't the job opportunity He wanted for me, then something better will happen. And he was like, wait, no, you need to realize that what you did in your past is now affecting what your opportunity is now. You know, that sucks.
Like he was saying, basically, you might not be able to work as a nurse.
Yeah, I mean, it was
kind of what it sounded like to me.
Yeah, and just kind of like own up to the fact that you made this mistake.
Yeah,
and which I have, but the way he had put it, you know, own up to it and just recognize that this wasn't a part of God's plan. You know what I mean? Like the DUI, like he doesn't.
How does he know that?
I mean, it's true. I don't know.
But anyway, that was his perspective.
And
what he was telling you was that it might not happen.
Yeah,
he scared you.
And he did. It scared me, and I wanted to just go back to my bubble of, well, everything's going to be okay. And I think I did go back to that bubble because there's no reason in living in that fear. I mean, I'm going to do whatever it takes. You know, I'm not going to give up. I'm not going to go out and drink. I'm not going, you know, I look forward to the fact that I can potentially share with the next girl, the next guy coming down the road who has a DUI and is dealing with something similarly.
Right.
Just like I look forward to meeting the newcomer in the meeting and to help guiding girls. And when people reach out and ask me questions about sobriety and why I got sober and, you know, what I did. And it warms my heart.
Yeah. You have a very sunny disposition, very bubbly personality. And it's a gift, right?
Yeah.
But I feel like it's a gift. And that gifts are easily dismissed, but I would like to acknowledge that you made a choice. Like you were presented with, like you were living with an unresolved problem. You don't know how it's going to turn out, but you actively choosing to live in faith that things will work out. And I remember being on a walk with you going, this is the time when your faith is tested. Are you really willing to do God's will? This will be the time because it's like, I want what I want, you know, and are we willing to do God's will no matter what it is?
Absolutely.
Yeah. And you know to the depths of your heart that this situation will benefit someone else.
Yeah. I do believe that. Yeah. And I think there are things in my life that over the past few years that I was still grasping onto, you know, parts of my life. Maybe whether it be decisions or choices or relationships or where I'm going to move, where I'll work, you know, and I've just kind of started to give those things up. Like I remember when I was applying for nursing school, I was so stuck on, no, I want to stay in this area. I have family here. I want to stay here. And I was willing, I started to apply outside of California.
Right.
Because I was like, God, I'm willing to go where you want me to go. And accepted into this program, which is, you know, I could still stay and live here.
That's amazing.
And it was like I had given up that faith and, you know, that control, I mean.
Yeah.
And, you know, I still feel like in every aspect of my life, I'm working to do that. You know, I'm single. I'm 32. I want to get married. I want to have children. But if God chose for me not to have that life, I wouldn't dwell on it. I trust everything that he has prepared for me and has laid out.
That's amazing to be able to have that trust. Is that what gives you your faith and your ability to be happy?
Absolutely, yeah.
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 Do you feel content and happy?
I do, yeah.
Yeah.
That's an interesting question because I hadn't really thought about. I experience joy. That's the great thing about sobriety is I experience feelings. I can be sad and I can cry or I can get into action. I don't have to hide. I can feel joy. I can feel pain. I can feel for other people, you know? And yeah, I'm very grateful and I have an amazing family and I speak about them because they're such a huge part of my life.
Yeah.
I have 4 nephews and 1 niece and I just find so much joy by being around them. And I am happy. Mm-hmm. I think that it's important to live in the moment, stay where my feet are, because of course there's that temptation to think, well, when I'm a nurse, I won't have this stress. I won't have this fear of not becoming a nurse. So then I'll be happy. Or, you know what I mean?
Like you're not doing that happiness projected thing.
Yeah, I try not to. I try to be happy now, not...
I'll be happy when.
I'll be happy when. I'll be happy, okay, well, when I get married and when I have kids, like, then I'll be okay. Or, you know, and...
Was that a conscious choice to live that way? Or do you feel like just because of the nature of your faith and the program that has led you to be happy now?
I think my faith has a lot to do with it.
Because you're trusting.
Yeah.
That everything will be fine.
That everything will be okay. Yeah, regardless.
I love that saying, in the end, it'll be okay. And if it's not okay, it's not the end.
Exactly. But of course, I have those down moments where typically it involves social media. And, you know, you're flowing through Facebook or like Instagram and you're seeing people having babies and people, announcements and weddings, and you just wonder, or I just wonder, is that something that's going to happen for me? And God knows my desires. He knows that I desire that I want that.
And it's tough to date in sobriety. I did a couple of podcasts already about dating and sobriety. And
cool.
Yeah, and it just sounds like it's so hard.
Especially when you're kind of a changed person. I mean, for me, I'm typically pretty darn open, and I am not afraid to have that conversation about their beliefs, their walk with God. Mm-hmm. Do they attend church? And, I don't want you to say you're a Christian. I want to see that you're a Christian. I even have sometimes in first dates brought up the fact that I don't believe in premarital sex. And again, let's go back. This is not the old person I was.
Right.
So
like you used to strut on your walk of shame.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I'd be like, hashtag.
That's right. I know.
Yeah.
Slut, yay.
Hashtag walk of shame. And now I just have so much more respect for myself and my body, and I know that those temporary fleeting emotions only, that they don't last. And so anyways, I have mentioned that before, and I don't get second dates. And
weird.
And
funny.
I say, fine. Bye-bye.
Fine.
Yeah. And it's okay.
Off you go.
Yeah. Carry on.
Yeah.
So I'm okay with that.
Okay.
Yeah.
And how are you meeting people these days?
So I had done something online. I think I did a Hinge or one of those friends of friends online.
What about isn't there a Christian Mingle?
There is, but I'm not ready to pay for that right now yet. So I did these things where it was friends of friends, and I actually went on a date with one guy who was a Christian, and we had a wonderful date. Uh-huh. It just turns out we didn't have a second date. It just didn't vibe. But
yeah.
I actually didn't feel the need to tell him all my expectations.
Have you decided maybe you're going to save some things for the second date?
I think I'm learning.
Yeah.
I think
it's a process.
Right. I've always been that person who's do it now, figure it out now. And so you're right. I think I'm just let me clear the air. But I need to be more, I'm still working on myself. And
it doesn't really allow for a relationship to grow when you just dump your baggage.
No, it doesn't.
Here it is.
That's true. And that's another thing.
I
want them to know the real me. So then I tend to say I'm in recovery. And, when is that an appropriate time to have that conversation? I don't know. Is it the first, second, to third? I just go with my gut. But, lately I've been trying to be more social and active in church events so that I could potentially meet people there. Yeah. I have a friend who I just met, actually, and she told me she met a guy through Christian Mingle.
Okay.
I think...
Isn't there something about a paid... Listen, I've been married a long time, so what do I know? But if it's paid, it sort of weeds out the lower level people who are not really that interested. Yeah. Like events and adventures. I know that's really expensive.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Listen, I don't mean to be plugging something, but it would weed out sort of people who don't have their act together enough to be able to cough up a bunch of money.
Well, that's true.
You kind of have to have your act together to be able to pull the trigger on a deal like that.
I agree. Well, I was dating someone from my church for a year. About 2 years ago, we broke up, and I just kind of took that time to focus on school, to focus on myself, and now I do feel like I am ready. I've been open to meeting people. But I do believe, God wants us to take action. He doesn't just deliver this person on my doorstep. Yeah. But to be honest, right now, someone said, why aren't you on Christian Mingle? You need to be on Christian Mingle. Oh. And I said, you know what? I right now am just walking through a season of my life where I don't feel, and this is me being vulnerable, I don't feel like I'm putting my best foot forward right now. Meaning, well, I don't want to come to meet someone and have to explain this situation. I don't want to have to explain this is what's going on with my license. I kind of want to meet someone later on the road when I'm just a nurse and I'm good and I don't have to talk about all that.
Do you feel shame around that? Or embarrassed?
I think it's a little bit of
Because you're saying you don't put your best foot forward, which means what is this? Is this your worst foot? Or less than best?
It's interesting when I say things out loud. Yeah, I think that I want to be able to present myself as having my stuff together, but they're going to know the true me anyway. Yeah. So it's almost like, why wait? I think
and men love a project. Men are fixers. You could be the damsel in distress.
But that's something I'd mention. I know. But then I'd mention on the first date everything, and they'd be like,
oh yeah, that's a lot.
She's crazy.
That's a lot to cough up.
I just kind of want to be in a place where I'm not in this awkward interim, this season, this. And I don't know why it's awkward. It's not awkward. This is my life.
It just is. Yeah.
It just is.
Yeah, and I just feel like time is so precious. It's like we've lost people recently. Yeah. I had 2 girlfriends pass away this last year, and suddenly young, and I've had like a sense of urgency. Like, what is it that I want to do? What is it that I want to give? I need to get. There is no later. There is no later. So I sort of feel like if it's on, like I need to be clear about what my goals are, get into action. Don't be fooled into thinking I have time, because whether it's having coffee with a friend, it's like, get it on the calendar. You know how I am. It's like, when are we meeting? What time? When? And it's like 5:32. Does that work for you? Because but it's like there is no later.
Yeah. No, you're right. You're right. I think it's kind of like that whole, later it'll be better.
Later, I think I'll be happy later.
I think in my daily life, so there might be a bit of shame, and there might be a bit of embarrassment, because in my daily life I do run into people, because I am so social now and I don't hide like I did when I was in active addiction. I'm telling people about my situation and saying, I passed my test, and it's always, great, what's the next steps? Can you get a job? So now I think like the first, then it's, when I'm filling out the profile, what do? I'm a registered nurse. Where do you work?
In transition.
And it's almost like every day I'm sick of having that conversation. I want it to be finally to a place of, I'm a nurse and I work here.
Yeah. And that really is, living with an unresolved issue.
It is.
It's like, do I put my life on hold? Do I move forward? Do I have to wait to be, is happiness going to come later? Can I choose it now? It's just cool that we get to ask these questions and consider these. Before I found like this, let's just call it this path, whether it's, a spiritual one, recovery one, or whatever. It's like, it really wasn't awake, know? And I feel just blessed that we're awake and we're just asking the questions. These are important questions to ask. So I applaud you, and I appreciate you being so vulnerable, and it feels like processing out loud. I feel like I learned so much by processing out loud.
I feel like I did some processing out loud here.
Yeah, that was the point, right? And so I feel like other people will definitely benefit from that.
Well, yeah. I hope so.
Yeah. I know I really appreciate you. You have such a sweet, pure heart and such a happy spirit. Thank you for taking the time to come.
Of course.
And share all that.
Of course. This was so nice. I mean, to come and to sit with you and to have just this conversation and to make some realizations about myself that maybe I didn't know an hour ago is special. And these are the types of things that I never did. I never sat with people.
Me either.
And talked with them honestly and openly. So thank you for having me.
Thanks so much.
Yeah.
Yay! And you went through.
Thank you for listening to Odaat Chat. Please visit odaatchat.com for more episodes, to leave feedback or suggest topics and guests. Until next time.